All right, guys, this is my second time on KOO Christian Productions, and this time we'll be speaking on Molinism, Calvinism, and Arminism. And the founder of Molinism is, correct me if I'm wrong on this pronunciation, but Luis de Molonia. Uh, and he was a Spanish Jesuit theologian. And his purpose was to reconcile God's absolute sovereignty with genuine free will. And the key concept was middle knowledge, as in like what would happen. And Molinism teaches that God possesses three types of knowledge, and that this is where middle knowledge comes in. First is natural knowledge, what could happen, God's knowledge of all possible outcomes. Now, middle knowledge, which is what I was talking about just about 10 seconds ago, what would happen. God knows what every free creature would do in any given circumstance. Free knowledge, what will happen. Uh, God's knowledge of what will actually occur in the world He chooses to create. In this view, God sovereignly arranges the world such that His purposes are fulfilled through the the genuinely free decisions of individuals. Um, a couple beliefs that Molinists have are humans are let humans have free will, the genuine ability to choose otherwise from right and wrong. And what just fell? Oh, never mind. But God uses His middle knowledge to actualize the world, where people choose actions that align His plan. Um, Election is based on God's foreknowledge of how people would freely respond to His grace in many circumstances. There's just a couple beliefs Molinists have. And their view on salvation is God provides sufficient grace to all us, and that salvation is genuinely offered to all people, not just a certain amount of people. And the other one is God creates a world in which people who would freely respond to the gospel are given the opportunity to do so. And just a couple other things that I believe are strengths for Molinism. Why I believe in Molinism personally, because it balances divine sovereignty and human freedom. I Another strength is it maintains human responsibility without denying God's control. Another one is it avoids making God the author of evil. God wasn't the person who created evil, it was us. We decided we are going to compare ourselves to Christ, and comparison leads to all sin. When you decide that you're going to be jealous of someone, you're going to compare them to yourself as an insecurity. It always leads to sin. Um, and that's about all I got on Molinism. But now we're going to talk on Calvinism. The founder is John Calvin. He It was developed by Protestant reformers, and his purpose was to affirm God's absolute sovereignty in all things, including salvation. God chooses certain individuals for salvation, not based on anything they've done or would do, but solely according to His grace and will. But there's a couple points I have on Calvinism. First one's total depravity. Human beings are so affected by sin that they could not choose God on their own, which, I mean, doesn't make any sense. I mean, salvation, literally in the Bible, it says nobody can come to the Father but by Jesus. I mean, He's talking to us. I mean, we can choose God on our own. We have the decision of free will. Unconditional election, God's choice to save someone is not based on foreseen merit or actions. So, like, it's not based on what they've done good or what they've done bad. It's just based on God wants to do it because He feels like it. He's doing it with no purpose at all, which goes against the Bible. But limited atonement, Christ died specifically for the elect. Christ died for the sins of all the people in the world. He didn't just die for these certain elected people. Irresistible grace. This one's pretty funny. When God calls someone to salvation, they will come. His grace cannot be ultimately resisted. okay, that doesn't make sense because I don't even know how many times I've shared the gospel and been told no, and then 2 years later they get saved. So I mean, that doesn't make any sense at all. I mean, the people that believe it maybe have not ever experienced that, but my experiences, I mean, the irresistible grace just doesn't make sense. Perseverance of the saints, those truly saved will persevere in the faith to the end. Paul says, I don't know where, I don't know the reference, but he says in the Bible that if they turn away from us, uh, they were never really with us. So those truly saved will persevere in faith to the end. Yeah, they will. They will if they're truly saved. But I mean, God wouldn't just tell us that. I mean, they wouldn't tell us that Christ like saved them and they weren't actually saved as Calvinists. That doesn't make any sense. The couple key beliefs for Calvinism is God's will is ultimately decisive as who is saved. So we don't have free will based on that key belief. It's just what God says goes. Humans are free in the sense that they act according to their desires, but those desires are governed by a fallen nature apart from grace. Yeah, humans are free. They do act according to their desires, but their desires are governed by a fallen nature apart from grace. Mm, no. Our desires do not go with what everybody else says. Our desires are our desires. We're different from everybody else. We're not all the same. Election is entirely God's sovereign decision. Like, oh my goodness, bro. Like, how does that make any sense? Election is entirely God's sovereign decision. God isn't the one that tells us we're saved or not. I mean, we look at ourselves and we test our salvation. We look to God and we say, has my life been changed? And just my next podcast will be over this. You'll understand it. But election is not entirely God's sovereign decision. I mean, God didn't go through a list of people and pick one by one who he's going to save. Now, I'll go over predestination in a minute, but that's what Calvinists believe. But their view on salvation is God effectively calls the elect to himself. They believe that salvation is secured entirely by God's initiative and power. Um, and they believe that assurance is grounded in God's unchangeable will and promises. Yes, his will is unchangeable and his promises will never be broken. Um, that part is true, but the other parts just aren't. Um, Now there's a couple things about Calvinism. It doesn't really have strong scriptural support for God's sovereignty because of this reason. When it says predestined, it means our destination is heaven, and heaven is already decided when we become saved, not predetermined. That word is mixed up. I mean, we can be mixed up as human beings because we're not perfect. One of the smartest people, in my opinion, as a Christian, in my opinion, John Arthur is one of the smartest people to ever live. And he got predetermined and predestined mixed up. I mean, predestination, as in our destination in heaven, is like it's already decided, and not predetermined. Now, it emphasized the seriousness of sin and the necessity of divine grace. And another part of Calvinism is it provides assurance of salvation for believers in their opinion. They believe that when they look at themselves that they're saved because Christ picked them. I don't believe Calvinism. Um Now we're gonna go over Arminism, which is very new to me. I don't know if I'm gonna pronounce this right, but his name is Jacobus Arminius, something like that. Um, he was a Dutch Reformed theologian. His purpose was to preserve human responsibility and the universal offer of salvation while affirming God's grace. Um, God elects individuals to salvation based on his foreknowledge of their free response to his grace. Their core beliefs are um, God's grace precedes and enables a person's response to the gospel. Second part is free will, and humans can accept or reject God's grace, which is true. They got that part right. Three, conditional election. In the Bible, it literally says that Christ's love is unconditional. So this part is just so wrong. It's actually wild. God elects those he foreknows will believe. Unlimited atonement. Christ died for all people. That is the most valid part of this Arminism. And resistible grace, again, just like Calvinism. God's grace can, no, opposite from Calvinism, my bad. God's grace can be resisted by human will. We can't resist Christ's gift. And the last one, possibility of uh, apostasy. True believers can fall away from faith in classical Arminism. That's basically what Arminism is. We can fall away from faith. Um, Paul literally says that we can't lose our salvation, but if we turn away from Christ, we were never with him. So we can't fall away from our faith. And if we do, so called, fall away from our faith, we were never in faith. Their key beliefs are God's grace enables all people to respond, but does not coerce belief. Election is based on foreseen faith rather than an unchangeable decree. Human beings are morally responsible for accepting or rejecting the Bible. Um, I'm not even going to say anything about that. I mean, you look at this and you say human beings are morally responsible for accepting or rejecting the gospel. That's true. Election is based on foreseen faith rather than an unchangeable decree. There's no election. God's grace enables all people to respond but does not coerce belief. God's grace does enable all people to respond, as in yes or no. That part is true. Um, People that believe in Arminism, they say that their strengths are it emphasizes God's love and justice toward all. If there's an election, it's not God's love or justice because he's not going to elect someone to be picked. Um, Another strength they believe is strong commitment to human responsibility. That is the one part that I understand, like even just a little bit, that yeah, it's our responsibility to be saved. Um, They believe that it encourages active evangelism and personal response. That's the one thing that Calvinism doesn't do. That's the one thing Calvinistic beliefs don't make sense. God tells us to go out and make disciples. Um, why would we make disciples if you're being picked? I mean, if you're gonna be saved based on an election, why would we go out and do it? I understand that it's God's word and we need to pay attention to it, but why does that make any sense? Um, and I mean, what I believe is Molinism, and I don't have any more on Arminism or Calvinism or Molinism. I'm wrapping it up. But I mean, you look at these, and you say, I want you to go over this, and I want you to look at it and be like, which one do I believe? If it's Molinism, that's the one I personally believe. Calvinism, I don't believe that there's an elect. Arminism, it's just, I mean, there's a lot of it that does make sense, but there's some that is wrong. And in Molinism, it's not wrong. I mean, you look at the Bible, and there were 40 authors that came together over a couple hundred years of time and made one perfect book. But I believe that it's Molinism because there's no contradictions. It links up with the Bible. So